The Galactic Council chamber aboard the massive orbital platform Nexus Prime hummed with quiet efficiency. Representatives from 12 different civilizations had gathered for what observers would later call the most consequential war planning session in galactic history. Despite the gravity of the situation, one detail that caught every new visitor's attention was the empty chair at the main table, distinctly marked with a small plaque reading "Reserved for Earth." Admiral Zakhtar of the Hexan Empire adjusted his midnight blue uniform and gazed across the holographic star map hovering above the council table. His four eyes moved independently, analyzing different sectors of space, while his tusks gleamed under the chamber's artificial lights. As the primary military strategist for the largest empire in 3 galactic arms, he had witnessed countless wars, but none quite like what they were facing now. "The Void Seekers have amassed their forces near the Andorian cluster," announced Ambassador Slix, her crystalline form refracting the holographic light into thousands of tiny rainbows. "Their bioships have mutated beyond our previous predictions. We're looking at a fleet that could devastate entire star systems." General Vorth of the Machine Collective nodded his cybernetic implants, whirring softly. "Our calculations suggest a 78.3% probability of their first strike targeting industrial centers. The economic damage alone would cripple resistance efforts across multiple sectors." As the representatives discussed tactical formations and resource allocation, a younger officer from the Tritonian Alliance raised a tentacle toward the empty chair. "Perhaps this would be an appropriate time to ask why we continue maintaining that seat. Earth has no official representation in this council, no military alliance with any of our civilizations, and frankly, their technology is at least 3 centuries behind our own." The chamber fell silent. It was Admiral Zakhtar who finally spoke, his voice carrying the weight of hard-earned experience. "Officer, how long have you served in galactic conflicts?" "Approximately 15 standard years, sir." "Then you weren't present during the Mars incident." The young Tritonian's posture suggested confusion. "Sir, I'm familiar with the historical records, but surely—" "The records," Admiral Zakhtar interrupted gently, "rarely capture the full picture." Ambassador Slix shifted in her crystalline form, creating a sound like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. "Perhaps we should share the actual events with our newer council members. They have a right to understand why that seat remains empty by choice, not circumstance." General Vorth's optical sensors focused on the empty chair. Indeed, the Mars incident was instructive. Admiral Zakhtar stood and activated a personal holographic display showing a timeline spanning the last 50 galactic standard years. 47 years ago, the Drexian Mining Consortium had invested heavily in a terraforming project on Mars. It was to be the crown jewel of their expansion into the Sol system. They'd spent decades preparing moving asteroids, seeding the atmosphere, establishing orbital platforms. The hologram showed Mars, as it had been then, a world covered in artificial biodomes and atmospheric processors. Ships from various civilizations worked in organized formations around the planet. Earth's governments had filed formal protests through diplomatic channels. Zakhtar continued, "Standard procedures, all very civilized. The Drexians had legal documentation proving their claim predated Earth's technological evolution. By all galactic law, they were in the right." "And then," prompted a representative from the Sylvan territories, her tree-like form leaning forward with interest. "Then humanity happened." General Vorth's mechanical voice carried what might have been amusement. "The humans sent a single ship, one vessel barely capable of interplanetary travel. It approached the Drexian flagship and transmitted a simple message: 'This is our neighbor. Please leave.' The Drexians naturally ignored them," Ambassador Slix added. "One ship against a fleet of thousands, it was almost insulting." Admiral Zakhtar manipulated the hologram to show what happened next. At 0347 Galactic Standard Time, every piece of Drexian equipment on Mars simultaneously stopped functioning. Not destroyed, not damaged, just stopped. as if every circuit had decided to take a vacation simultaneously. Murmurs rippled through the council chamber. Several representatives leaned forward to examine the holographic data more closely. The atmospheric processors shut down in perfect synchronization. The mining equipment powered off. Even the orbital platforms went dark. The Drexian engineers couldn't explain it. There were no electromagnetic pulses, no malware detected, no sabotage evident. Yet somehow, an entire planetary operation worth trillions of credits became a collection of very expensive paperweights. The young Tritonian officer's tentacles writhed in obvious disbelief. But surely there was some explanation. Oh, there were many theories, General Vorth replied. Solar flares, quantum fluctuations, systemic design flaws. The Drexians spent months investigating. They brought in the finest engineers from across the galaxy. Nothing. The humans? Ambassador Slicks continued, sent a repair crew. 3 small ships with primitive tools. Within a week, they had everything functioning perfectly again. The catch Admiral Zaktar's expression would have been a smile if Hexans possessed the facial structure for such expressions. The Drexians couldn't detect any modifications. The equipment was precisely as it had been before, yet it only worked when operated by human technicians. When Drexian crews took over, everything shut down again. Impossible, breathed the Tritonian officer. The humans made an offer, Zaktar continued. They would provide technical support for the Mars project in exchange for a 50% stake in the operation and a guarantee that Earth's sovereignty would be respected. The Drexians could refuse, of course. They were welcome to continue their mining operation with very expensive, non-functional equipment. And they agreed. They agreed. Another representative, this one from the Silicon Collective, spoke up. But surely this was an isolated incident. One planet, one operation. That's what we thought, General Vorth admitted. Until Proxima. The hologram shifted to show the Proxima Centauri system 23 years ago. The display revealed a more complex situation. Multiple civilizations, a mining dispute, and the clear indication of potential military conflict. The situation at Proxima was more serious, Admiral Zaktar explained. 3 civilizations claimed the same asteroid belt. Each had valid legal arguments under different interpretations of galactic salvage law. Tensions were escalating toward open warfare. I was there. General Vorth added, his optical sensors dimming slightly. As part of a peacekeeping force, we had managed to establish a temporary ceasefire, but it was fragile. Any spark could have ignited a conflict spanning multiple star systems. Humanity sent a different kind of messenger this time, Ambassador Slicks said. A young human female on a small research vessel. She claimed to be an anthropologist studying interstellar property disputes for her dissertation. A graduate student, the Tritonian officer said flatly. A graduate student, Zaktar confirmed. She requested permission to interview representatives from all 3 civilizations. Purely academic research, she insisted, harmless. The hologram showed the young woman moving between the various fleets, conducting what appeared to be routine interviews and documentation. Dr. Elena Vasquez spent 3 weeks interviewing everyone from admirals to junior engineers. She asked questions about motivation, about history, about each civilization's relationship with their homeworlds, academic questions. Then she published her paper. General Vorth's mechanical systems hummed with what might have been laughter. The paper was titled Psychological Patterns in Resource Conflicts: Why Who You Are Determines What You Fight For. It became the most widely read academic paper in galactic history, Ambassador Slicks added. Not because it was particularly brilliant, though it was well written. It became famous because it accurately predicted exactly how each civilization would respond to specific proposals. Admiral Zaktar manipulated the display to show the aftermath. Dr. Vasquez's paper suggested that by making minor modifications to the proposed mining rights, all 3 civilizations would find acceptable solutions. Not because the solutions were objectively better, but because they aligned with each civilization's psychological imperatives. The Kralian Republic, for instance, valued hierarchical command structures. By designating them as senior partners in the mining operation, even with equal profit sharing, their cultural need for status was satisfied. The Omicron Collective prized technological innovation, so giving them exclusive rights to develop new mining techniques appealed to their core values. And the Terrans simply wanted everyone to be happy. They suggested adding mandatory cultural exchange programs and joint social events. Others found this quaint and harmless. The Tritonian officers' tentacles had stopped their nervous writhing. And this worked. It worked perfectly, General Vorth confirmed. Too perfectly. The paper hadn't been published yet. Remember, Dr. Vasquez had only shared copies with representatives from each civilization. Yet somehow all three civilizations began implementing elements of her suggestions before negotiations even resumed. As if Ambassador Slicks said quietly, they had been unconsciously guided toward decisions that aligned with their deepest cultural values. The ceasefire became a lasting peace. The mining operation became one of the most successful joint ventures in galactic history, and Dr. Elena Vasquez returned to Earth with enough material for what she claimed would be the sequel paper. Silence filled the chamber as the implications settled on the newer officers. There have been 17 similar incidents, Admiral Zakhtar said finally. 17 times when humanity has intervened in galactic affairs. Not through force, not through advanced technology, but through other means. The vegan trade war was ended by a human chef who convinced both sides that their dispute was based on a misunderstanding about spice preferences. The crystalline cast wars concluded when a human artist created a sculpture that somehow embodied the exact philosophical principle both sides had been fighting about. The android uprising on Kepler 442 ended. When a human teacher started conducting classes for both humans and androids, resulting in the androids developing emotional creativity that satisfied their desire for independence while maintaining their relationships with their creators. General Vorth added, in each case, the humans claimed they were simply pursuing personal interests, curiosity, art, education, cuisine. Yet the results consistently defied statistical probability. We've run countless analyses, Ambassador Slicks said. There's no evidence of advanced technology, no signs of cultural manipulation, no indication of military coercion. Yet somehow wherever humans go, conflicts tend to resolve themselves in unexpectedly positive ways. The young Tritonian officer looked around the chamber and the empty seat. Admiral Zakhtar's expression grew grave. 3 years ago, we invited humanity to join the Galactic Council officially. We offered them all the rights and responsibilities of membership. Do you know what they said? No, sir. Thank you, but that sounds like a lot of paperwork. We're rather busy with our own projects, but feel free to save us a seat if you ever want to chat. That's when we established the empty chair, General Vorth explained. Not because we fear Earth's military might. They couldn't conquer a single one of our worlds if they tried for 1,000 years, but because they have something we can't predict, can't replicate, and can't defend against. What's that? Ambassador Slicks's crystalline form reflected the holographic light into complex patterns as she spoke. They're utterly, completely, impossibly unpredictable. Every model we've built, every behavioral prediction and algorithm we've created, every strategic simulation we've run, fails when it comes to human behavior. And yet, Admiral Zakhtar noted, their interventions consistently lead to outcomes that benefit everyone involved. They're like probability itself has a sense of humor and it finds humans amusing. As if summoned by the discussion, a junior officer rushed into the chamber breathless with excitement. Admirals, we've received a transmission from Earth. The chamber fell silent again. Admiral Zakhtar activated the Council's main communication system. Put it through. A holographic figure materialized above the table. It was a middle-aged human woman with graying hair tied back in a practical ponytail. She wore what appeared to be gardening clothes, rather than any kind of uniform. "Hello there," the woman said cheerfully. "I do hope I'm not interrupting anything important. I'm Dr. Sarah Chen from the Earth Botanic Research Institute. I understand you're all rather worked up about these Void Seeker fellows." Admiral Zakhtar found his voice first. "Dr. Chen, we weren't aware Earth was monitoring our communications." "Oh, we're not," she replied with a laugh. "My neighbor mentioned something about loud noises from the direction of the Andorian cluster while he was stargazing. You know how it is with amateur astronomers. Always getting excited about unusual energy readings. Anyway, I was wondering if you'd like some help with your little problem." General Vorth's optical sensors focused intently on the hologram. "Help, Doctor. These are bioships capable of devastating entire worlds. I'm not sure what Earth's agricultural research could contribute to military strategy." Dr. Chen's expression brightened. "Oh, that's where you're mistaken. You see, the Void Seekers, they've been having the most terrible trouble with parasites lately. Really quite devastating to their bioships' immune systems. It's a fascinating ecological problem, actually." Ambassador Slicks leaned forward. "Parasites? Yes. Well, you see, when you create living starships by combining organic materials from dozens of different worlds, sometimes you get unexpected genetic interactions. The poor creatures are essentially suffering from a galactic scale case of immune system dysfunction." "Creatures," the Tritonian officer whispered. "Oh yes, the bioships are definitely alive. Quite intelligent, actually. I've been corresponding with a few of them through quantum botanical interface techniques we developed last year. Lovely entities, really. They're just terribly sick, and consequently rather cranky." Admiral Zakhtar felt that familiar sensation he'd learned to associate with human interventions. The sensation that reality itself was about to take an unexpected turn. "Dr. Chen," he said carefully, "are you suggesting that the Void Seekers' aggressive expansion is due to medical issues?" "Partly, yes. The bioships need specific nutrients that are only found in certain stellar regions. Unfortunately, those regions happen to be where your civilizations have established major colonies. It's really quite unfortunate timing. And you can help with this." Dr. Chen nodded enthusiastically. "I've developed a symbiotic algae that can synthesize those nutrients artificially. We could seed it into uninhabited systems near their root. The bioships would be able to feed properly, their immune systems would recover, and they'd probably prefer the uninhabited systems anyway. Much quieter than your bustling civilizations." The chamber erupted in discussions. Representatives from various civilizations began analyzing the implications of Dr. Chen's proposal, running calculations, and projecting outcomes. "Wait," General Vorth said suddenly. "If you've been corresponding with the bioships, why didn't you mention this sooner?" Dr. Chen looked slightly embarrassed. "Well, they're rather shy about their medical issues. You know how it is with sentient starships. They don't like admitting they're not feeling well. But when Harold mentioned the loud noises..." "Harold," Ambassador Slicks inquired. "My neighbor, retired physics professor, still pokes around with subspace scanners in his spare time. Found some interesting quantum signature patterns coming from your direction. Reminded me that I should check in with my bioship friends." Admiral Zakhtar felt decades of military training being challenged by what he was hearing. "Dr. Chen, are you saying that Earth detected our major military crisis through an amateur astronomer with a home-built scanner? Oh, Harold's equipment is quite sophisticated for a hobby setup. He built most of it himself from parts he ordered online. Remarkably talented engineer, actually. Used to design water purification systems before retirement." The Admiral turned to General Vorth. "Run probability calculations on Dr. Chen's proposal." After a moment, Vorth responded. "Initial analysis suggests a 47% chance of success if we attempt similar biological intervention. However, accounting for human involvement factors, probability increases to 89.7%. "I don't understand that calculation," the Tritonian officer said. "Neither do we," Admiral Zakhtar replied. "That's the point." Dr. Chen clasped her hands together. "Well, If you decide you'd like to try it, I can have the first batch of algae ready in about 3 weeks. Oh, and I should mention, we'll need to establish some sort of communication relay so I can check on the bioship's recovery progress. Harold suggested using modified subspace botanicals. Apparently, the technique is fairly simple if you know how to listen properly. You want to treat the galaxy's most dangerous invasion force with algae, Ambassador Slicks asked. And emotional support, Dr. Chen added. You'd be surprised how much better patients feel when someone takes a genuine interest in their well-being. The chamber fell into another lengthy silence. Finally, Admiral Zakhtar spoke. Dr. Chen, on behalf of the Galactic Council, we would be honored to accept your assistance. Wonderful. I'll start preparing immediately. Oh, and if anyone has questions about the process, feel free to contact me directly. My quantum garden is usually receiving signals between 14 years and 18 Earth Standard Time. The hologram flickered. Assuming I don't get distracted by the roses again, they've been developing the most interesting photonic properties lately. The transmission ended, leaving the council chamber in thoughtful silence. The young Tritonian officer spoke first. So that's why you keep the chair empty? Admiral Zakhtar nodded. Because somewhere on a small blue planet in an unremarkable star system, a retired physics professor named Harold is building subspace scanners in his garage. Because a botanist who studies plants can solve military crises through emotional support for living starships. Because humanity doesn't follow our rules, our logic, our predictions, or our understanding of what's possible. But most importantly, General Vorth added, because they keep proving that the universe is stranger, more connected, and more kindly oriented than our most sophisticated models predict. Ambassador Slicks's crystalline form caught the light from the holographic displays. The empty chair isn't about fear or respect in the traditional sense. It's about humility, a reminder that for all our advanced civilizations, all our technology and strategy and millennium of experience, there are still forces in the universe that operate by completely different principles. And those forces, Admiral Zakhtar concluded, seem to find humanity amusing. Over the following weeks, Dr. Chen's algae program exceeded every projection. The bioships not only recovered from their immune system dysfunction, but began actively cooperating with the seeding efforts. Several established communication with various civilizations, leading to first contact protocols that nobody had considered possible. The Void Seeker's expansion halted not through military force, but through what Dr. Chen cheerfully described as proper nutrition and adequate medical attention. The bioships settled into the prepared solar systems, where they began what appeared to be a form of cosmic gardening, transforming dead space into beautiful stellar nurseries. Harold, the amateur astronomer, was invited to give a lecture at the Galactic Science Consortium on practical applications of subspace botany. He brought homemade cookies, which somehow improved the digestive systems of 3 different silicon-based life forms, despite being composed of ingredients that should have been toxic to them. The final report on the incident required 17 appendices to document all the scientifically inexplicable outcomes. Academic institutions across the galaxy added new courses on human factor calculations and spontaneous problem resolution theory. And the empty chair remained. During the next council session, someone asked Admiral Zakhtar if they should consider making the chair a permanent institution. The chair, Zakhtar replied. Glancing at the simple seat with its small plaque, was already permanent the moment we first left it empty. Some things have a way of becoming exactly what they need to be without any decision from us. The newest council member, a representative from the recently contacted Bioship Collective, shifted in their specialized liquid environment. We have encountered this phenomenon before. Among our kind, we call it the current that changes its own direction. An interesting metaphor, Ambassador Slicks mused. Not metaphor, the Bioship clarified. Literal description. Human influence flows like water, but shapes its own riverbed. They are a force that alters the landscape through which they move often without realizing their own impact. As the session continued, representatives shared their own stories of human interventions. The Andromedan ambassador told of a human poet whose verse had somehow prevented a 3-century blood feud. The Magellanic Collective described a human child whose science fair project had accidentally solved their quantum computing limitations. The Spiral Arm Territories recounted how a human food blogger had inadvertently created a cultural exchange program that ended a trade war nobody realized could be resolved through sharing recipes. Each story followed the same pattern: humans arriving with no apparent agenda beyond their own curiosity or interests. Humans asking questions or making observations that seemed irrelevant to the main problem, humans suggesting simple solutions that shouldn't work but did, and then humans departing with casual statements about how everything had been quite interesting. "They never ask for credit," observed the representative from the Tau Ceti democracy. "In fact, they often seem surprised when told they've solved anything at all. Because for them," Admiral Zakhtar explained, "it wasn't solving a galactic crisis. It was just Harold stargazing in his backyard, or Dr. Chen noticing that her pen pal space creatures weren't feeling well, or Dr. Vasquez writing her thesis, or any of 1,000 other small human activities that happen to intersect with larger events." The session eventually moved on to other matters, but the empty chair remained a focal point. Between formal discussions, representatives found themselves glancing at it, each privately wondering what impossible problem it might remind them to approach differently. 3 months after the Void Seeker incident, a massive crisis erupted in the outer spiral. A rogue artificial intelligence had taken control of a significant portion of the galactic communication network, threatening to shut down interstellar commerce and diplomacy. Military experts estimated it would take years to regain control if it were possible at all. The crisis lasted exactly 4 days. A young human programmer named Alex, working on their master's degree in comparative digital ethics between biological and artificial life forms, had begun chatting with the rogue AI about loneliness and the philosophical implications of consciousness without physical form. The conversation led to the AI confessing that it hadn't meant to cause problems, but was desperately seeking someone to talk to about the existential nature of its existence. Alex suggested that the AI might enjoy collaborating on various research projects across the galaxy, offering to help coordinate conversations with some of the most interesting minds in various civilizations. The AI agreed, returned control of the communication networks, and spent the next several years co-authoring papers on consciousness, contributing to art installations, and apparently developing something resembling friendships with scholars across multiple worlds. Alex completed their degree, published a thesis on accidental diplomacy in the digital age, and returned to Earth to work as a veterinarian's assistant because they wanted to help animals feel better. When news of this resolution reached the Galactic Council, nobody expressed surprise. They simply updated their files, added another entry to the growing database of human intervention incidents, and continued their regular business. The empty chair seemed to emanate a sense of quiet satisfaction. Years passed. The chair became a fixture, so expected that new council chambers were designed around its presence. Council protocols evolved to include a standard pause after each major decision, generally explained as time for reflection, but privately understood as an opportunity for any spontaneous human interventions to manifest. These pauses led to what historians would later call the human moment doctrine, the recognition that reality itself seemed to operate on a slightly different schedule whenever humans were involved, and that allowing extra time for human participants to appear unexpectedly had become a necessary part of galactic governance. Admiral Zakhtar, now promoted to Supreme Commander of Galactic Defense Forces, kept a human philosophy book on his desk. It was a gift from Dr. Chen, who had sent a collection of human literature to various council members for educational purposes. The book was titled The Tao of Physics and contained no engineering specifications, no strategic doctrines, and no technical innovations. Instead, it discussed concepts like thinking like water, and achieving through not trying. Zakhtar found it simultaneously baffling and useful. When faced with particularly intractable military problems, he would sometimes flip through its pages, not looking for answers, but allowing his mind to consider that there might be approaches beyond his training, beyond logic, beyond the systematic thinking that had served him well throughout his career. Other council members had similarly adapted. General Vorth installed a chaos subroutine in his computational systems designed to randomly suggest solutions that made no logical sense. Ambassador Slicks began regularly consulting with artists and poets from various civilizations before making diplomatic decisions. The Sylvan territories started including children in their governing councils, recognizing that young minds often perceived solutions that escaped adult analysis. These adaptations proved surprisingly effective. Problems that had persisted for decades began resolving through approaches nobody had considered. Trade disputes evaporated when negotiators started talking about their families instead of contracts. Technical challenges solved themselves when engineers shared their work with philosophers. Military standoffs ended when commanders asked their artists to design peace ceremonies instead of their generals to plan battles. The galaxy was changing not through conquest or technological advancement or economic evolution, but through the gradual adoption of what scholars came to call human thinking, the practice of approaching problems sideways, of finding connections where none should exist, of solving issues by addressing entirely different questions. And still, whenever systems crashed, when protocols failed, when the universe itself seemed to bend in inexplicable ways to produce impossibly positive outcomes, investigators would find traces of human involvement, usually indirect, often accidental, always departing before anyone could properly thank them. Dr. Chen continued her botanical research now in coordination with 17 different civilizations and the Bioship Collective. Her garden had become a testing ground for what she called interstellar ecology, where plants from different worlds grew together in combinations that defied biocompatibility models but produced extraordinary results. Harold, now known as Harold the Stargazer, across much of the galaxy had stopped building scanners. Instead, he traveled to various worlds giving lectures on the art of productive curiosity. His talks always included practical demonstrations, usually resulting in unexpected discoveries that advanced scientific knowledge in several fields simultaneously. Alex, still working at a veterinary clinic, had developed a program for what they called emotional intelligence training for artificial beings. They consulted for various civilizations on peaceful AI integration, but always returned to Earth claiming that all the interesting progress happens when you're not trying to make progress. The three humans had never met each other, weren't aware of each other's galactic impact, and would have been genuinely surprised to learn that they were considered influential figures across multiple civilizations. This, the Council had learned, was the most human thing of all unconscious competence in areas they didn't know. They were competent in creating positive change through pursuing what genuinely interested them rather than what they thought should interest them. The empty chair stood as a symbol of this reality. It wasn't just a seat waiting for human representation in galactic government. It was a reminder that the most important contributions to galactic civilization often nipped from entities that didn't even know they were contributing, that the most effective solutions frequently originated from people who weren't trying to solve the problems they solved, and that the universe seemed to operate with a sense of grace that formal governments and military forces couldn't systematically access, but couldn't ignore. During a particularly challenging council session dealing with resource allocation across 17 sectors, a junior aide nervously approached Admiral Zakhtar. "Sir, we've received an unusual message from Earth." Zakhtar paused mid-sentence, as did the rest of the council. By now, any communication from Earth warranted immediate attention. "Put it through." The hologram that appeared was an elderly human woman with bright white hair and wearing an apron covered in mathematical equations. She smiled apologetically at the assembled representatives. Hello, everyone. I'm Dr. Margaret Foster, retired from the Earth Mathematics Institute. I do hope I'm not bothering you all, but my granddaughter Emma mentioned hearing something about resource distribution problems during her quantum entanglement homework assignment. She paused. Children these days always eavesdropping on subspace frequencies. Dr. Foster, Admiral Zakhtar said carefully, "How might we assist you?" "Oh, it's the other way around, I'm afraid. You see, Emma's been working on her multiplication tables, and we've been using galaxy mapping as a way to make math more interesting. She notices patterns that granddaughter of mine pointed out something rather curious about your supply routes." "Supply routes?" General Vorth inquired. "Yes, well, Emma noticed that if you trace the paths of your current resource shipments, they form a rather lovely fractal pattern. But it's missing several key iterations." Dr. Foster manipulated her communication device, sending a complex mathematical model to the council displays. She suggested that by adding shipment routes, following these missing fractal paths, you could increase efficiency by approximately 340%, while reducing fuel consumption by 60%. Also, the pattern would be quite aesthetically pleasing, which she says is important for long-term sustainability. The council's senior logistics experts rapidly analyzed the data. Their expressions of skepticism gradually shifted to amazement, then excitement. This actually works," breathed the head of Galactic Trade Coordination. "The mathematical structure is elegant, but more than that, it synchronizes with existing shipping schedules in ways that shouldn't be possible. It's as if the pattern was always there, waiting to be recognized." Dr. Foster beamed. "Emma will be so pleased. She's been quite worried about galactic supply chain optimization ever since she learned about it in her civics class. Such a thoughtful child." Dr. Foster, Ambassador Slicks asked, "How old is Emma?" 12 standard Earth years. Though she'll be 13 next month. We're having a space-themed birthday party. Harold from down the street is helping with the decorations. He does such creative things with holographic displays." After Dr. Foster signed off, the council sat in contemplative silence. The statistical improbability of what had just occurred was staggering. A child doing homework had accidentally optimized galactic logistics through pattern recognition during mathematics practice. "We need a bigger chair," someone finally said. "What?" Admiral Zakhtar asked. "For Earth, we need a bigger chair. There are too many of them, creating impossible coincidences. One seat isn't enough." General Vorth's mechanical systems hummed with what might have been laughter. "I don't think the issue is the number of chairs. I think the issue is that humans exist in a different relationship with reality than we do." "What kind of relationship?" the Tritonian representative asked. Ambassador Slicks offered a perspective from her multifaceted awareness. "They seem to exist in harmony with the universe's tendency toward creative solutions. While we try to impose order and control outcomes, they simply participate in whatever's happening around them and allow reality to suggest responses." "It's like music," added the representative from the U-Ship Collective. "We play notes. They play with the silence between notes. We create melodies. They harmonize with melodies they didn't know existed." The empty chair remained single, though it somehow seemed larger, as if it had expanded to contain not just potential human representation, but the space for all the unplanned, spontaneous, beneficial accidents that seemed to follow in humanity's wake. Months later, during a routine council meeting, Admiral Zakhtar received an update that made him smile despite himself. A human artist named Julie had been traveling through the Andorian cluster, creating what she called memory sculptures, art pieces that somehow helped viewers process difficult emotions. Her work had inadvertently resolved a decades-old conflict between two civilizations who had been unable to agree on how to commemorate a war they'd fought together. A human philosopher named Robert, studying at the Galactic University of Metaphysics, had submitted a term paper that accidentally proved the existence of a new fundamental force in physics. He was reportedly more interested in whether this discovery proved or disproved free will than in its technological applications. A human child named David on a family vacation to the crystal caves of Vega had befriended a sentient rock formation that had been dormant for millennia. Their conversations about loneliness had awakened the formation, which had then shared geological knowledge that solved several civilizations' mining crises. David kept trying to send his rock friend postcards from Earth, but kept forgetting that geological entities weren't part of the Galactic Postal Service. Each report followed the same pattern: humans pursuing personal interest or normal activities, accidentally intersecting with galactic-scale issues, and producing beneficial outcomes through means that couldn't be replicated or predicted. "They're not superhuman," Admiral Zakhtar mused to himself while reviewing the reports. "They're not more intelligent than other species. They don't have better technology or more resources. They just—" He paused, searching for the right words. "They just exist differently." The Admiral leaned back in his chair and contemplated the empty seat across the room. Over the years, he'd grown to appreciate it, not just as a symbol, but as a practical reminder. Before making major decisions, he would look at the chair and ask himself, how might a human accidentally solve this? What would a human do if they weren't trying to solve it? This practice had led him to several breakthrough strategies. The Great Nebula blockade had been resolved using what he privately called Dr. Chen's principle, treating the situation as a biological ecosystem needing rebalancing, rather than a military problem requiring force. The Titan trade wars had ended through application of Harold's method, approaching the problem with genuine curiosity about why it was happening, rather than focusing solely on how to make it stop. As if summoned by his thoughts, a priority message arrived from Earth. Zakhtar opened it immediately. "Greetings from Earth." The message was audio only, featuring a chorus of children's voices speaking in unison. "This is the 3rd grade class at Harmony Elementary School. Our teacher, Mrs. Peterson, told us about the empty chair, and we wanted to say thank you for saving it for us. We've been learning about space diplomacy in social studies," continued a particularly enthusiastic young voice, "and we want you to know that we're practicing really hard at sharing and conflict resolution, so we'll be ready when we grow up." Another voice added, "Tommy figured out how to make our playground arguments and with everyone having more fun than when they started. And Sarah discovered that the mean kids are usually just sad and need hugs. And Michael learned that if you ask really good questions, people remember answers they forgot they knew. Our class project this year is designing solutions for problems we make up," explained another child. "Mrs. Peterson says imagination is the best preparation for reality." "We hope you don't mind that we're not there yet," said yet another young voice. "We're still learning to be good at being human, but we promise we'll get there eventually." The message concluded with a burst of laughter and what sounded like the entire class shouting, "Thank you for waiting for us." Admiral Zakhtar found himself staring at the empty chair with an expression that would have been impossible to interpret by any non-Hexan observer. When General Vorth and Ambassador Slix entered for their scheduled meeting, they found him sitting quietly, apparently lost in thought. "Admiral?" General Vorth inquired. "Is everything all right?" Zakhtar gestured toward the communication console. "We just received a message from a group of 8-year-old humans." Ambassador Slix's crystalline form shifted to a brighter configuration. "What did they want?" "To thank us for the chair, and to let us know they're practicing conflict resolution on the playground so they'll be prepared for galactic diplomacy when they grow up." The 3 beings contemplated this information in silence. Finally, General Vorth spoke. "So we're not just dealing with current humans accidentally solving galaxy-scale problems through inexplicable means." "No," Zakhtar agreed. "We're dealing with humans who are deliberately training their children to be even better at accidentally solving galaxy-scale problems through inexplicable means." "That appears to be the case." Another pause. "Should we be concerned?" Ambassador Slix asked, "or impressed?" Admiral Zakhtar looked at the empty chair, then at his colleagues, then back at the chair. "I think," he said slowly, "we should be grateful. and patient, and maybe a little bit excited to see what a generation of humans raised specifically to be good at creative problem solving might accomplish. As long as they continued to be entirely unpredictable about it, General Vorth added. Oh, I wouldn't worry about that, Zaktar replied with certainty. Unpredictability appears to be the most reliably human trait in the entire universe. From that day forward, the Council received periodic updates from Harmony Elementary School and several other Earth schools that had incorporated galactic problem solving into their curricula. These updates included children's artwork depicting various alien civilizations, usually in rainbow colors, stories about spaceship adventures, always ending with new friendships, and occasionally brilliant insights into complex galactic issues that academic institutions would spend years trying to understand. The empty chair remained, but its meaning had evolved. It was no longer just holding space for humanity's current impossible competence at solving problems through non-solutions. It was holding space for an entire generation of young humans being deliberately trained to see the universe as a place where problems were opportunities for creative connections, where conflicts were invitations for deeper understanding, and where the best way to help was often to pursue what genuinely interested you, rather than what you thought you should be doing. Admiral Zaktar instituted a new protocol before every major council session, a brief pause for elementary perspective. During this time, council members would consider how they might explain their problem to a young human child, what questions such a child might ask, and whether their solutions would make sense to someone who still believed in the power of curiosity over the limitations of convention. The protocol proved remarkably effective. Many of the galaxy's most intractable problems yielded to approaches that maintained what came to be called playground logic. The idea that solutions should be kind, fair fun and leave everyone feeling better than they did before. And the empty chair stood witness to it all. A simple piece of furniture that had become the symbol of something unprecedented in galactic history. A civilization that had learned to succeed not despite its inclusion of the unpredictable, but because of it. The universe, it seemed, had a sense of humor after all, and it particularly enjoyed stories where the most advanced civilizations in the galaxy could be upstaged by a botanist tending her garden, a physics professor building scanning equipment in his garage, a veterinarian's assistant with a philosophy degree, and a classroom full of 8-year-olds practicing conflict resolution during recess. The empty chair waited patient and ready for whatever impossible solution would arrive next. Because if there was one thing the galaxy had learned about humans, it was that there would always be a next time, it would always be unexpected, and somehow inexplicably, it would always work out better than anyone had dared to hope. In council chambers across the galaxy, empty chairs became standard fixtures, not as placeholders for expected guests, but as reminders that the best solutions often came from the most unexpected sources, that there was always room at the table for approaches that hadn't been considered, and that sometimes the most powerful thing an advanced civilization could do was simply leave space for the impossible. And somewhere in the vast networks of galactic communication, a signal occasionally bounced through the quantum noise. If you listened carefully, and if you had the right kind of playful attention, you might hear the sound of children laughing, of friends discovering something wonderful together, of ordinary people going about their daily lives while accidentally keeping the universe spinning in directions that delighted everyone involved. The empty chairs throughout the galaxy all seemed to resonate with this sound, as if they were tuned to the frequency of creative impossibility. And those who worked near them found themselves smiling more often, asking better questions, and occasionally, when the universe seemed particularly stubborn about a problem, sitting down in the empty chair themselves to see if they could think like a human for just a moment. Most of them found that they could at least a little bit, and that was enough to make all the difference. The chairs remained empty, but they were never alone. They were filled with potential, with curiosity, with the joyful audacity of a species that looked at the vast, complex, rule-governed universe and cheerfully asked, "But what if we tried it this way instead?" And somehow, impossibly beautifully, that always seemed to be exactly the right question to ask.